Okay, a very good afternoon to all of you joining from ASEAN, and good morning to one of our speakers, Olivia, who is joining the session from Europe. This will be session 3 of the capacity building workshops on advancing inclusion in international higher education in ASEAN. Our DJ today is Miguel. He played some music while we were waiting for everyone to join. So if you have a guess which country were these songs from, feel free to put it in the chat. We will play this game in the future sessions as well. Just pick one country and let's see who recognizes the music. So today we prepared with a 2-hour-long agenda. Again, in the first hour, we will have 2 guest speakers with us. And the second hour is full of interaction designed by our facilitators, Changda and Noprenu. They will explain the flow of the breakout rooms later. But before we start, let me introduce the 2 speakers who we have here us for today. The first speaker will be Yazrina, Professor Yazrina Yaya. She's currently the Deputy Director for the Center of Leadership Sustainability of Higher Education Leadership Academy, in short, ACEPT. Her task at ACEPT requires her to establish global leadership programs that will assist the leaders and community of local academic institutions in managing their respective division or unit. At the moment, she's also the acting Deputy Director of Center for Leadership Profiling at ACEPT, which requires her to look at the higher education talent management ecosystem, focusing on competency-based talent management. She's also an associate professor at the Faculty of Economics and Management at the National University of Malaysia. Prior to her appointment with ACEPT, she was the UKM Director of Corporate Communication between 2019 and 2020, and the UKM Director of International Relations Center between 2015 and 2019. Our other speaker today will be Ms. Olivia Partik. She is the liaison person for Asia, representing the Erasmus Student Network. ESN, many of you might know this organization, is the largest international student-led organization in Europe that has recently started to venture outside European borders. In this role, Olivia is in touch with NGOs and student organizations both in Europe and Asia to lay the foundation for a better connectivity of both regions when it comes to supporting international mobility in higher education. Formerly, she was national president of ESM Germany, and she has been advocating the student perspective in higher education mobility and policymaking for several years. For her graduate degree in psychology at the University of Cologne in Germany, she's currently on a research year at Keio University in Tokyo. Having spent her first mobility period in South Korea, she became interested in the competitiveness of East Asian education systems. So our 2 speakers today will approach the topic of stakeholders and mapping stakeholders from their different perspectives. So Olivia will come from the youth perspective, and here's Rina from the university perspective, and a little bit also from the policy side. So very good to have you both on board. Stop sharing screen and give the virtual Zoom floor over to Changda and Prenu to moderate the discussion, to help the speakers keep the time and run this first hour.
Okay, well, very good afternoon to you all. Like Rekha just mentioned, we have with us 2 speakers today representing perspectives from the national government and also institutional level. Professor Yazrina Yaya. And also we have Olivia with us to represent another key stakeholder from the youth perspective. And both Changda and we believe that today you will get into another step of thinking about internationalization strategies and your action plan, adding into your existing thought about the value and propositions of your action plan. And last week, you had a thought about resources to be allocated towards that plans. Today, we are going to talk and discuss about stakeholders and how you are going to engage all of them, whoever they are, in your respective institutions and based on your action plan. So let's hear it out today. We are going to listen to Yasrina first. Yasrina, you will have 20 minutes, and then I will just have to interrupt you 5 minutes before the end of your time. And then we will ask Olivia to join us. Then we hope that we can have a spare time of about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. Okay, Yasrina, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Napranu. Hi, everyone. Hi to Reka and CD. Now, let me share the screen first. Hope you guys are able to see this, right? Cool. Okay, now, what I'm going to share with you today, this is a topic that's given mapping stakeholders, building alliances to promote inclusion in international activities. Now, these are the topics lined up. We're going to recap a little bit on inclusivity and internationalization. Who are the stakeholders? What, why, when, where, and who, and how. We're going to build the alliances and the outcome at the end of the day. So now, I think you've gone through, this is the third one, the third series. So you would have known now what is internationalization of higher education and how you're going to make it inclusive for all. You know, rather than the minority of the students or the higher education institution community and also the community outside. So it's getting everyone to look at who are the stakeholders particularly, and it's to get everyone on board via the internationalization activities that you can or you will be doing or embarking in the future. So what's most important, all right, in order for you to do internationalization, there has got to be a strong culture. ASEAN here is internationalization and the values, all right? The values of internationalization at your own particular institution. Everyone has to work towards it, because I'm very much aware that all of you here comes from various backgrounds. Some of you comes from the international office, some of you are academics, some of you are in certain office that involves in some global network, all right? But as you may have known, when you talk about internationalization, the culture that's embedded with internationalization is always something about relation, right? That is why a lot of the office that's put in charge on internationalization is called Office of International Relations. So it's building that relations that would, at the end of the day, when you do it, it will give you an outcome, and the outcome has to have an impact towards your own institution. Yeah. So who are the stakeholders? Because you need to know who are the stakeholders in order for you to get all these people, because you do not want internationalization just to focus on certain people, because we have already known when we talk about ASEAN, right, it's about mobility. When it's about mobility, there's only a handful of people who are able to go for that mobility. So how do we get everyone to be on board? All right, so who are they? Who are the target group or the beneficiaries that can be included in the higher education internationalization plan? So if you look at this particular drawing, all right, there are definitely the ministry, okay, who are the ACI strategists, who are the policy makers. And then you've got also the students. These are the center of your internationalization activities in the universities. And who are they? They're the local students, they're the international students, undergraduate, postgraduate. So you see they're full-time exchange, interns, summer students, and then you've got research students and all that. So everyone at the university, the students cannot be left out, all right? If they're not able to do mobility, then what can you do, right? And then the community, where you can see the community is actually, oops, sorry. The community is the public community. All right, and also the ones that's near the local community, near to your institution. Then you have the staff, who are the academics and also the support staff. Then you also have your partners. And who are your partners? University partners, the association networks, and then the ASEAN internationalization country platform. For instance, like Erasmus, Share, RIHAT, that, yeah? And then you've got, RIHAT is in ASEAN. I think you've heard Dr. Romian speak before this. And who are the industry people, the embassy, the high commission, okay, the branch office of international companies, or any international organizations. So in making sure your internationalization agenda, Right? You need to look at all these stakeholders that are involved, the beneficiaries who are going to get the impact of whatever that you have done. But at the center stage is definitely the students and the staff of your institution. So if you look at the ministry, that's the foundation, okay? There's a foundation that sets whatever that you're going to do at your institution, because you need the ministry to assist you in a lot of things, partly the policy. Okay, so in order to do the internationalization at the ministry level, so I'm holding another cap now, all right, there are diversification strategy, which we look, where are the countries that we want to focus? This is when you see sometimes the ministry go and attend, certain education expo and all that. And of course, the ministry, particularly in charge of the higher education or look at education, will always have students at heart, all right? And growth, global competitiveness, international curriculum, and country skills needs. So if you look at this, the diversification at the ministry level, what we look is, who are the people who's going to come into our country? All right. What are the offshore offering that we can assist the university? This is when we can have branch campus outside. And what kind of the digital offerings? Because we're not talking after the pandemic. And when it's students at heart, what are the students' experience? This is when the visa, the immigration issues comes in. And then the students' well-being. All right. How are they being involved, and how are the international students or even our local students who goes abroad are being taken care of? Growth and global competitiveness is to look at whether the ministry can have incentive and package measure. For instance, like Malaysia, we have this particular package where we encourage international students to come, where we give exemptions of fees, but it's very, very competitive. And then when the ministry wants to expand growth, we look at G2G engagement, the institutional network, and of course, the students' permit to work, because these are the attractive package that the government can provide. When we talk about international curriculum, now we've got to have that quality framework. All right, there must be a framework that governs, that the academic looks into when they want to offer whatever courses that involves the international student. And on top of that, the country skills need, whether there are international skills training, because nowadays we're talking about what we call all these short trainings and all that. So that's something that we can look into at the ministry level. So at the ministry level, we look at all these things, and there'll be policies of internationalization, policies of getting international students to come in that needs to be put in place. And these are the things where the higher education institution look at this and how they can go about. Yeah. So if you look here, the policy, and then the higher education institutions, I mean, you guys at the university must know what are the policies, what are the internationalization strategies that have been put, so that you guys will be able to work towards that, right? Because the country, the ministry itself wanted definitely the universities to move forward, to get more people to come, because it brings income. And I know the countries in ASEAN, particularly in Philippines, yeah, the Commission of Higher Education has put up a lot of policies, a lot of effort, making sure that the internationalization actually really moves forward. All right. Then once you know what are the policy, this is when you can adopt whatever that has been stated by the government, by the ministry, to look. And one of it is the global competitiveness. You see that I've got the box there, building alliances. So we're going to talk about that building alliances, particularly. Now, in order for you to do building alliances, I think most of you would have known, all right, when we want to build alliances, it's like building relations. How do we build relations? We need to meet people. We need to talk to people. We need to tell people about our university. So it is to expand your higher education growth. But what is it? Why, when, where, who, and how? All right. So it's to build the foundation. I always believe is to build strong relationship that last forever. Even you're no longer at the international office, even you're no longer at the university, it's that strong relationship that your institution has with another institution. Yeah. And to expand your institution. Why? Because you want to expand the internationalization plan, because you want to brand your university, you want to position your university. When should you do it? Now. It's not yesterday, or probably yesterday. Okay. Where? Based on your institution internationalization strategic plans. So who should you look into? Your international partners or the international network. And how you're going to do it, you need an execution plan. All right. So who can be your international partners? It has to be based on regions: Europe, Latin America, North, South, East Asia, and Asia Pacific. All right. Often when you go into an office, or even if you are an academic, whom should I partner with? If you come from the academic platform, or you are a teacher, or you're a professor, you've already got your network, because when you did your PhD, you've got your friends. When you attended conferences, you've got your friends. All right, but what you need to do is to look and map it back with your school's internationalization plan. Where is it that you need to do the outreach? Where can you get that strong commitment, that strong relationship that will be able to transcend and get students to come either virtually or physically? Okay, but if you are at the international office, step down for a while or stop for a while to look, where have the university covered? Which region have you covered? All right, based on my particular experience, when I looked back at when I was at the global office, is to look, we used to have, because Malaysia is very much into the UK and Europe. We've got a lot of partners in UK and Europe, but we've got very few partners from Africa. We've got very few partners from India, for that matter. So if you knew where you don't have very strong partners, start building them. Okay, so these are what you need to look based on the regions. Where are your strengths? Find among your academics who did PhD in these countries, see how can you actually extend that friendship or that relationship to come up with something good. Okay, now for instance, in Malaysia, we do have last time South to South. Okay, South to South government. It starts with government, GTG, and then South to South. So we work towards the Latin America University. And from there, okay, we managed to get the Latin America universities to come to Malaysia. Who would have thought that can be done? But it can be done, right? Then you look at the institutional network, the local and global. So who? So it's about a cooperative link between people and countries for a joint purpose. There is a membership fees if you go into the international association. So you need to look, when you have one, personal relations, you build alliances with academics, with people, that's fine. But you also need to look at the international association and network. So these are some of the associations and networks by region. All right, this list is not comprehensive. There's a lot more actually. All right, but this was done way back when I was at the global office, right? And perhaps there's new ones. So you got to look at each of these. For instance, ACU, Association Commonwealth University, International Association University IAU, or Federation of Islamic, the University of Islamic World, FUIW. Do they have fees for you to pay? Do you have the allocation of budget for you to pay? The university, not you. Okay, the university has to pay. And what are the things that these associations offer? All right, do they provide mobility? Do they provide scholarships? Do they provide, connections, network, and all that? And in Asia, we've got a lot of it. We've got AUAP, we've got UMAP, we've got AIMS, we've got AUN. But some associations are very exclusive. So you got to know how can you embark to get into that exclusivity if it permits, or how can your university join, all right? So then, based on the association, you look, those that I've listed out, there are things, activities that they do. Student mobility, staff exchange, partnership, conferences, and some.
Yes, Rena, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Napranu. All right, and the community research. So this is when you look at the worldwide coverage as well, in terms of the International Association, Asia Pacific, and all that, right? Now, then each of them, you look whether what are the things that they focus on certain particular topics. So moving forward, all right, what is the association that is best to join if you have budget cuts, okay, and get the value for money, all right? We were once involved with ACU. They provide a lot of good conferences and all that, but it's too very much expensive. And not many people want to go to the Europe because of our exchange rate. So is it worth it for you to join that association? So that's something you need to look at. And how can you maximize the university's co-partner or being a co-partner, or whether they have industrial affiliation, all right? And of course, then, can you register as a country? Like ASEAN Uninet is registered by the country. and only certain universities are able to embark on that. And of course, then whether your ministry at your country can spearhead the membership. All right. So how do you go about? These are the things. All right. Now, for partners, definitely you can do the online meeting, emails, international conference, for the community, communal activities. For the students, I think the platform of what we have virtual has provided that platform, good webinars. You can have chit chat buddies, festival, cultural festival, global cafe, food, dance, mass design, country tour, all sorts of things. And for the ministry, you must make sure that you know what is the G2G, be close to those division that's in charge of the network. And for the industry, make sure that you are in contact with the embassy at your country, because they are the ones that are going to give that network to you. So the rule of thumb is to engage, engage, and engage. You must always be in the radar, okay, of your partners. All right. And of course, you've got to do that. In order to do that, you've got to have intercultural skills and a people person. And when you talk about inclusivity, you want to include all these people, you must always think of others. What are the benefits that you're going to get when you put them? All right. And of course, then to promote inclusion, these are the activities that most of us have done. Competition, coaching, you can do movies, book reviews, classes, summit, conferences, all right? That to promote that these people can embark based on the topics that you want. So as a conclusion, why should you do it? Because you need to share the expertise, increase focus on students, and it's at the end of the day to strengthen your institution, to add that value if you're into ranking, branding of your university, and at the end of the day, positioning your higher education institution. And most importantly, whatever that you do, it has to have an impact, or it has to have an impact. So whatever activities that you do, most of us are, are so engrossed of doing all these sorts of activities that we didn't have the time to sit back and look. What have we done? Where are we right now? How is it? So like I said, when you engage, engage, and engage, and explore, and engage, and explore, and engage, right? You need to make sure that they come to a point, okay, what is the outcome? Where is my university has been positioned in terms of internationalization? Are there more students that's coming in? Do I build that good brand? So these are when you say things that you do has to have an impact. Yeah. So literally, what I can conclude, there are additional materials that you can read. I've already given some of there are other more on videos and whatnot I've given to records. You can ask from that. So bottom line is, strong alliances can thrive even when these agreements exist, but they cannot thrive where free and open communication is shut down. So when I talk about engage, is having that open communication, all right, is having that skills to embark that relationship with your partner, and make sure that you will always remember the rule of thumb is in one whole year calendar program, all right, always ask how they are doing from the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. All right, always engage your partner so that they can remember. And how can you do it if you have limited resources? Then I say involve your staff, involve the community, involve even your students to assist you. It need not be you who actually do the program, but you can coach the students to do the program so that you can do the engagement. So at the end of the day, that is what inclusivity in internationalization is all about, to get people to move forward, to help the institution to move forward, and to gain as much as possible from the internationalization agenda. So that's it, Pranu and CD. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yasrina. I think it's very interesting because Yasrina comes from a country where the connections between higher education institutions and the government is considered very closed. And I believe that we have other participants who come from different system, and you might have some questions in store about how to connect with the government or how to connect with other stakeholders better. And don't forget that today we are going to ask you to really think and probably be able to identify key stakeholders based on your action plan or based on your institutional needs. And then Yasrina already mentioned about the strategies to build alliances by talking to us by telling us what, why, when, where, who, and how. And then we will be able to discuss more with her in the breakout sessions about the mechanisms and strategies, how to engage each particular key stakeholders, what mechanism we are going to use to get as much as we could in terms of getting inclusion and inclusiveness into the internationalization agenda, as she said. So let's move on to Olivia. She will be presenting and telling us and sharing with us about her thought from youth perspective and how to engage youth more in internationalization strategies. And you have 20 minutes, Olivia.
Thank you very much. Also turns out there's a lot of construction noise in the background. I did apply a microphone filter, so it should have fixed that. If you cannot hear me very well, please just interrupt me and let me know, then I will try to fix it. So yeah, I will start with sharing my screen as well. Right. So yes, I have the great opportunity to represent the student perspective today. So thank you very much for that. So as was mentioned in the introduction, ASEAN is basically the largest student-led organization in the field of mobility in Europe. And our motto is basically students helping students. And we are present in 42 countries with more than 500 local associations. Together, we cover more than 1,000 higher education institutions, and our roughly 15,000 volunteers, they take care of 350,000 international students every year. So just some background info for those who are not familiar with what ASEAN is doing. And our vision is basically that we want to support the enrichment of society through international students. So yeah, we are very much connected to the students directly. And also with all the activities that ASEAN is organizing, we are trying to cover 6 courses in total. There's education youth, which is of course quite obvious when working in higher education mobility. Then there's culture, health and well-being, employability, environmental sustainability, but also social inclusion. And it's very important to us that when we do try to support students on their mobility, we also support students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So social inclusion is very, very important to us. So yeah, allow me to just do a little bit of talking with this slide without lots of visualization. I will continue with that later. So yeah, student voice, why should you listen to it? That's the main question here. So I'm of course very grateful that I got invited here because our past working relationship, especially with ASEAN, for example, and other stakeholders, was very great. And we're very honored that those stakeholders, they continue to listen to our opinion. But maybe like for the entire group of participants, like why should you even listen to me as a student? That's a good question, I guess. As ASEAN, we are directly connected to the target group, which are students. Most of us are students and most of us have been on mobility ourselves. But more importantly, on the local level, our volunteers are in direct contact with international students every day. They often have a very close personal bond with them. They know their wants and needs. And this helps us for outward communication because we reach a large number of students through our communication channels every day. But also with all these international students, we have access to a huge data pool when we want to assess the success of implementation of mobility programs. We use this data pool very frequently, and later I will show you the result of 2 very large-scale surveys that we conducted. One specifically about challenges in mobility for disadvantaged groups, and the other one about challenges during the initial COVID-19 outbreak. If you do consider the student body as a stakeholder, then we are the most powerful by numbers because there's hundreds of thousands of us. However, at stakeholder meetings, there's most of the time only 1 or 2 student representatives present. So therefore, the ratio is not really much in our favor. So for example, if there's 1 representative for a higher education institution that has a staff of, I don't know, 5,000, there have probably been many emails and meetings before that representational function to make sure that their representation reflects like the opinion of all the staff. And with 5,000, that is already challenging. So look at 1 student representative per hundreds of thousands of students. I've been that representative many times, and if there were questions that I could answer based on statistical data, I always do that because instead saying of my own opinion, because in my view, that's the more appropriate thing to do. But there have been many instances where I've been asked very specific questions that concern students from all backgrounds, but I had to answer with my opinion. So basically the opinion of a 23-year-old female student from Germany. So even if my title is student representative, what I'm saying is not really representative at all. Also with students, so we haven't finished our education yet. We do not have a years-long career in specific fields that are very relevant here in policymaking. And even if a stakeholder selects a student representative they think is qualified, at the most we have like 5 years of experience, maybe in a position we're not doing full time because mostly it's volunteer work. We don't really have proper knowledge transfer and we are essentially self-taught. So compared to all of you with often decades of experience, we're absolute newbies. So that's probably a good reason why we are not very much represented in policy dialogue, right? I personally disagree because for one, not having this experience can be beneficial because we're not as stuck in old frameworks due to years of working in the same position, and therefore we can bring new perspectives. But also the world is so fast-paced nowadays that the student perspective really changes so quickly. It's absolutely crucial to assess it continuously. But the main reason why I think it's worth to listen to us is because there is actually something I am for sure better than all of you. And that might sound really cocky right now, but I'm 100% confident in that statement because what I'm talking about, what I'm so good at is, well, being a student today. It's what I and every other student are the greatest expert at. What is it like to be a student today, right? So this is why, in my opinion, our views should be considered as well, because if you are in a policy-making dialogue and you wonder what the impact of your new measures could be, just ask the students, because nowadays we really want to be active citizens. Students want to voice their opinion, but that also needs, they need to be, they need to get the impression that their opinion is being heard, and enabling the young generation to take action is something really fundamental and important, because honestly, we don't want to wait decades until we can become decision makers, especially not in matters that affect us now, because there's nothing more frustrating than being a target group about which decisions are constantly being made with no chance to actually challenge decisions if they affect us negatively. So in ASEAN, we are very passionate about making the student voice heard and often make use of the very large pool of students we can consult. So therefore, I would like to present some objective student voices with statistical data instead of just presenting my subjective opinion. And for that, I have prepared the outcomes of 2 of our surveys. The first survey is part of the Social Inclusion and Engagement in Mobility project, also for short CM, which ASEAN also supported us, for example, to collect more input from Asian students as well. And the methodology was that we asked about 13,000 students, almost 1,000 staff members. We had some focus group of students and even conducted physical study visits. So yes, a very large data pool. And I will just show you a couple of outcomes there, just very roughly, some that I thought would be interesting here. For example, when it comes to the strategy and the offer of mobility programs, what were some key findings? When we asked staff, then 93% said that their institution did include outgoing mobility in their strategy, but only a third of respondents included reference to disadvantaged groups specifically in their strategy. So you can see there's still much room for improvement here. And when we asked, does your institution have a diversity and inclusion strategy? About 2/3 of staff members said yes, they do, but still 30% said no. So while yes, there are a lot of institutions who do have that, there's still a lot of room of improvement here as well. When we look at barriers to mobility, why do some students refrain from going abroad, especially disadvantaged students? There are 3 types of barriers we can identify: institutional, which really reflect the technicalities of the mobility program itself; environmental, which is like the largest category. It can be almost anything, but for example, access to information or lack thereof could be another environmental factor, or the personal background, especially in disadvantaged groups. And then finally, attitudinal barrier types. This is basically the belief system of the student themselves, because even if they have all the opportunities to go and all the needs are taken care of, as long as they're not convinced that they're capable of going on mobility, they won't go. So we asked non-mobile students, why did they not go abroad? So unsurprisingly, lack of funding is the largest factor, but then a lot of technicalities with the program itself. So like the strategical factors, basically, that it's not flexible enough, or they were worried that it would extend their academic career, basically. Then also lack of knowledge was also kind of an important factor. But interestingly enough, only 2% said the reason was that they were just not interested in going abroad. So you can see the will to go abroad is really there. 98% would technically be interested. So this is basically the numbers we could have if we wanted, if we supported them enough. So when it comes to student support, what kind of supports do students need and what do they get? We asked students who did go on mobility what kind of activities before the departure was useful. And mainly it was informational meetings or events that they said was useful, because talking to the international office, for example, is very informative, or having briefing events definitely as well, but also social events, and then specifically events organized by the student organizations themselves were also deemed as quite useful. But however, something that I thought was kind of heartbreaking, because in 2021 that it's still such an important factor, health concerns raised by students, even in Europe, which does have European like universal healthcare and everything. And I thought this quote was quite, really heartbreaking. So a student said, I was ill several times during the mobility and started having problems with my mental health. It's incredibly hard when you don't have people you can lean on. I guess everybody who went on mobility can relate to the last sentence. I can as well. So we can see there's still like a lot of areas where there's still work to do. And then if we look at the experiences that the students had, challenges and impact. Fortunately, 76% said they had positive experiences while abroad. I don't know about you, but I personally was surprised that the number is not higher. And sadly enough, more than a third of students felt that they were treated differently or unfairly at their host university, and 15% thought they did not have equal access to resources and opportunities compared to home students, which I think is also quite shocking, really. And when it comes to discrimination, about 3/4 of students said they did not experience any form of discrimination during their mobility. However, almost a quarter did. And again, I was shocked when I saw that. And there's discrimination that could be nationality and race, ethnicity mainly, but also gender and social status as well. And again, I think that is so sad, because we're 2021 and this is still happening. So from those results, we developed some kind of recommendations, 14 in total. I will not introduce all of them. I will just give some examples, and we sent them to the European Commission, to national agencies and higher education institutions themselves, and also to student organizations. The first one I would like to say is, well, it's quite obvious, develop a strategy that ensures that all students with few opportunities are supported. Higher education institutions, they can make sure that this is included in their individual strategy and align basically their plans with national action plans. National agencies, they can make sure that underrepresented groups are supported in their policy actions. And then finally, on the government level, in the European case, it's the European Commission, they need to support national agencies and institutions to develop those strategies. Then enhance collaboration. National agencies can enhance collaboration on the national level with governmental agencies, for example, or civil society organizations. And higher education institutions, they could, for example, appoint a specific inclusive mobility officer that kind of supports the collaboration of departments, and also offer different mobility programs that have a variety of duration, because one semester of mobility is not possible for everybody, for example, out of financial reasons, or also because of health reasons. Then, very importantly, for me, coming from a student organization, work with students. National agencies can foster and support student networks. Higher education institutions can include, very importantly, students in the strategy development and support student and student organizations in getting involved. And then, of course, also need to talk about international student organizations. Yes, we also need to actively participate in the dialogue, which is what I'm doing here. And
Olivia, you have a few more minutes. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. I will try to wrap up quickly. So and then finally encourage students to discuss concerns, because national agencies, they should collaborate more with student representatives. Higher education institutions, they should organize feedback sessions and directly ask students for their feedback. But then again, international students, of course, need to get involved as well. we published a research report that where you could read everything in detail if you're interested. I sent it to Reka for the supplementary material. And we also developed guidelines for inclusive mobility promotion, and also if anyone's interested in inclusive communication manual. I also sent that to Reka to forward to you after the session. And then secondly, just very briefly, we also did a survey about student exchanges in time of crisis. We did that basically at the beginning of the pandemic, about May last year. So this all reflects really the first response from higher education institutions when the pandemic first hit. And I just have 3 really short findings because I thought they were interesting. So when we asked students what kind of informations were accessible to them, honestly, almost like around half of the students did not get any information in like an appropriate language about travel restrictions, about health concerns, everything. And of course, like we've advanced so much since the pandemic just didn't stop. But again, I think it's really interesting to see how much went wrong there. And I think we can just use it to learn from mistakes. When we asked students what kind of support they received, fortunately, most of them received academic support, but many of them, for example, reported mental health issues, and only 17% of students received psychological support, which I think is also kind of sad. And then finally, what kind of support did their home universities offer? Well, fortunately, around a third were academically supported, but then again, mental health, only a bit more than 10% received that kind of support. And a quarter did not receive support at all, and about a third were just like caught up in confusing communication and everything. So again, we've advanced far past that, fortunately, after the pandemic continues, but again, I think it's important to just learn from mistakes. So we also developed a couple of recommendations, for example, that all measures by the institution should be looked at through the lens of equity and diversity to make sure solutions for students from disadvantaged backgrounds are offered in the emergency response, and ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion actions in the recovery plans as well. So yeah, just to wrap this up, how to include students? Well, at the beginning of the presentation, I made my point why the student perspective is worth listening to, but is it actually being heard? Because I was asked to share my experiences in working with stakeholders in different levels. I can wholeheartedly stress that many stakeholders are doing a tremendous job at including the student perspective, even on higher level policy dialogue, especially, for example, ASEAN. But that is not always the case. We are often not taken seriously, for example, for the points that I made earlier about lack of experience. Some might even view us as childish because, especially my generation, Gen Z, is sometimes very blunt and almost aggressive in advocacy. And as a member of Gen Z, I can only hypothesize that this is partly due to feeling like oftentimes our hands are tied, basically, and that people are not listening or that our voices do not reach the right ears. Many young people react by just getting louder, and whether that's the right step is, of course, up for debate. But with you giving us the impression that we are being heard without making any of those unkept efforts, and by talking to us at eye level, we are more than capable of being professional, I can assure that. And on higher education institution level, frankly, this is a subjective point for me. Encouraging critical thinking is so important because besides ASN, I, for example, work with teenagers in schools. And honestly, the level of abstract thinking and debating about really controversies they are able to do that is so astounding. So help them unleash these abilities by showing them how to think critically. So yeah, but how do you include students? First of all, rely on bottom-up information flow. Policymakers contact your institution for information, for example, about how well new measures are working, consult students directly. But of course, that's not so simple. So how could that work? First, utilize students' organizations like us, for example. With the survey results, I think I made a point how helpful our close connection with the target group can be when assessing data. And we are always more than happy to help assess the student voice. So higher education institutional representatives, talk to your local student organizations. They will connect you to the target group, I promise you. And then secondly, and finally, ensure direct representation of the target groups in decision-making dialogues. This could be student liaison bodies on faculty level, steering groups, or representatives of disadvantaged groups in discussion rounds, anything really. And not only for producing output, but also for evaluating existing output. So ask students for their feedback. So yeah, I guess crucial is that you should try to build relationships with your students. So don't just treat us as data points, basically, but as your successors, because we want to thrive and get to where you are in a couple of years. So to just help us with that, because the will to do it is definitely there. So yeah, sorry if I started to ramble at the end. This is there was from my perspective. Again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to voice the students' view on everything, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Before well, giving the floor to some of our participants who already posted questions, out of my own curiosity, listening to both of you, I have my own questions as well, and because this is the advantage of having the microphone to yourself, so it's like I get the chance, the first opportunity to ask questions, because it's out of my curiosity. For both of you, who are the most underrepresented group of internationalization activities in your respective institutions or country? Olivia has already mentioned about student and focusing on students, but among the group of students in your country, what group is underrepresented in joining internationalization activities? And yes, Rina, I think you have to draw your experience from the IRO office and share with us about that, because I asked this question because I want you to answer the second or the following questions, because if you can identify the underrepresented groups, you will be able to identify who would be the right stakeholders for you to reach out. And I think that's the baseline of how we are going to ask our participants to discuss more in the breakout rooms. So, yes, Reina?
Okay, if you ask me who are the most represented group, right? For the students, I would say in Malaysia, or I believe in anywhere all over, is the disadvantaged students. The disadvantage here, what I mean is those who can be, what do you say, whether they have certain, whether they are blind or they are, you know, those kind of group, that's one group, but also those who are, I would say, not rich enough. In Malaysia, we call it these people who are under the certain amount of family income, right? Who are poor, particularly, right? Because when they are poor, sometimes their background of the studies, okay, where do they come from? Certain rural areas, they don't have that confidence, so they are left behind. Because this is when I see the most, because when we talk about internationalization, when you want to go global, all right, one of the things that the students will look into is definitely the use of language. All right, countries like Europe, countries like probably UK, Philippines, those who are very good in English, that's fine. Even in Malaysia, people say we can speak English very well, but there are a group of students who are not confident in doing that. So they are afraid to take that step. They're afraid to apply in a lot of things. So they are not represented in, you know, it's difficult to get those kind of groups unless you've got, like Olivia said, the right approach, meet them, you know, talk to them, do an engagement, then there's something that can be done. All right. So that's number one. And then number two is, of course, the disabled students. The disabled students are always somehow not being taught upon, all right, because they are disabled. So there are things when you want to do mobility. How do they go about? Do they get the opportunity? Where else? They should, because they have the potential. It's just that they may not, they may be blind or they can't hear well, you know, or something like that. So they are often left behind because there'll be questions even by the sponsors, all right, would say, how can they go about? You know, it'll be very difficult, especially when you go to, if you go to countries like United States or what I would say very high advanced country, where they can be taken part of, we are not too worried. But then again, whether there will be such funds, you know, to actually assist them. So that is what I would say in the group of students, where all the stakeholders, the one that I mentioned, something that we often missed also, Napranu, is the community. All right, is the community, because we're talking about the higher education institutions. When we talk about internationalization, I don't know about other countries in ASEAN, but I would assume being human, sometimes when we talk about internationalization, we have that perception, right? Ah, you come from the Arabic countries. Ah, you come from India. You come from China. You know, somehow all those images being played by the TV or by the media will come into your head. Okay, this is the set of people. So the community sometimes do not see, especially when you talk about universities at the rural area. Universities at the big cities wouldn't have any problem because we have a lot of, what I would say, exposure, right? But at the rural area, they would have a certain perception sometimes. So how do we get them to actually, because then comes the issue when you want your international students to come, where do they stay? If your university has got all the facilities, then fine. But if they don't, all right, then they have to rent a house, whether the community will be able to accept them. That's one thing. Okay, so in most high advanced countries, especially particularly in Europe, where people are quite open, there's not much of a problem. But in ASEAN, there are still certain areas where people are quite reluctant, or people have that kind of perception. So that would be my answer.
Okay, Olivia?
I agree with most of those, especially also from the European perspective. However, I would also stress within the category of disabled students, even more so specifically mentally disabled students, because physical disabilities, there are measures in place. I think in Europe, we are doing comparatively well. Of course, there's still room for improvement a lot, but there are a lot of measures there. But for mental disabilities, basically none. So I think they are gravely underrepresented. I don't know a single student with mental disability who went on mobility, not a single one. So I think that's quite sad. And about the disadvantaged groups, there's a lot of opportunities for financial aid here in Europe. So I think those who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, there's of course a lot of awareness that they need to be included. And I think the efforts to include them, they're also coming along decently well. Again, room for improvement, but there as well, specifically, I think, first generation academics. Because in Europe, I come from that background as well. And we just run into that situation when we tell our parents, oh, we want to go abroad and we have savings, we applied for funding, we can go. And then they just don't understand, like, why would you do that? Like, why? It's nice here. Why do you want to go somewhere else? And not only that, no support from family, but also sometimes just not being aware that this is a thing or why it can be rewarding. But I personally think this problem is quite easy to fix, because this is mostly just a matter of giving the right people the right information. So I think it's a bit unfortunate, because this group would be so easy to include better. So I hope that we will see an improvement in this category, especially quite soon.
Okay, thank you. And we have questions from Dr. Agustinas relating to the question I posted earlier. He specifically asked about refugees, and I think you might be able to answer, both of you. Agustinas, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Naprane. The question already answered by Yuan. Yeah, why I asked, because I have the quite quote unquote hard experience when I was in Indonesia, because there are some students from the refugee want to study in Indonesia, but the government of Indonesia, there is no regulation, especially for the university, to accept the students from the refugee. So thank you so much, Wan. Maybe the condition in Indonesia similar with Malaysia. Okay, and then Naproni, I have the second
Another
question.
Yes.
Yes, the second question about the accreditation. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Agustinas, he asked question to probably both of you about the clause or standard regarding numbers of students with disabilities who able to be accepted in any particular, I suppose, in any particular internationalization activities. Is that right? It's like the quotas for, well, those vulnerable groups that you just mentioned. Is there any mechanism to address that problems? Yes, Rina?
Yep. From my side, there is no, I would say, any standard that has been set upon, even at the ministry level. We have not been looking into it specifically. All right, these are the things. That's why I said it's very much left behind. Yeah, and often the students themselves do not even know that they can actually do it, and nobody is really pushing for them to do for it, to go for it. So that's always that discrepancies. By the end of the day, like Olivia was saying, it's to outreach to the students. But whether one of the things I was thinking, Dr. Agustinus, one of the things when we leave behind these people, all right, and we know now, let's say now we know we are knowledgeable, there's something that we need to do, because in everyone's institution, the universities, there would be these disabled students, whatever disabled category they are in. So in order to encourage them, one of the things is actually to push the ministry, if you want the numbers, all right, to have an allocation. But how can you push it? That is, it depends on certain, how in your country that is, you're going to do it. Like in Malaysia, particularly, I think Dr. Zainab, she's one of the participants. She's also the director of IRO. Okay, in Malaysia, we have this, what we call a committee of international directors. So that helps because they have a platform where they can go to the representative, the director, actually represent, all right, whatever issues that we think that needs to be forwarded to the ministry. So they've got that platform. So these are some of the things that, as a group, at the institution to start something. We thought last time when we did, it was just getting a group of people in the same universities or very passionate about internationalization, because we had issues on visa. So we wanted to solve that. So we get together, form the committee, get everyone on board, and then establish ourselves and get our voice to be heard. Yeah. So that's one of the ways we can go about.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think the question was chaired by Dr. Shao Sin from Myanmar. I think you've got the answer as well. And one last question before we go for the health break, then that would be for Olivia. I think Clara Gonzalez, she has a question about what support can the institution, higher education institution, could provide for students who are interested in joining internationalization. And I think Olivia would be able to answer the question from the perspective of students. What would be the most preferred support you would like to get? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that depends a little bit on whether students who organize internationalization activities are like their own independent student organization. This is more the European model, that we are independent organizations at the university. But I know that in a lot of Asian countries, they are basically part of the extended IRO support people. So it depends a little bit on that. If it's the first one, if they are independent organizations, then we can of course help them with resources. And I don't only mean money, but also something like having an office space or organization, a room for the organization can be worth a lot, because for example, my local ESN section is basically one of the largest in Germany, and we do not get an office because the university doesn't have one. And that limits our activities so much, really, because we don't have a meeting point where international students know, okay, those are the opening hours, we can go there. We would be so willing to do that. And that would take a lot of work off the IRO as well. If we said, yes, we just do our own office hours for the students to ask us questions, but since we do not get that office space, we cannot do it. So this, of course, is one of the factors, but I guess if those students are, as I said, part of like the extended IRO support administration, basically, then that is not so much a problem. What helps, of course, is if they're willing to do that kind of engagement, that is actually possible next to their academic life. So I know that some institutions are actually even willing to give them like some kind of credits for it. If they have a volunteering scheme that students need to have like some volunteering credits or need to participate in club activities, if that's a requirement, then it's of course super cool for them to do it in that way that not only interests them, but also helps the international students. But I am also aware that this is not possible for all institutions to implement. So that as well, most of those students, if they organize activities like those, they do it in the evenings, because during the day they're at the university. And then again, it can be something as simple, just look at the logistic level, just make sure that there's some room in the university that is even open in the evening where they can meet up, where they have Wi-Fi, where they can talk. It's honestly, even those simple things that you wouldn't think could be a problem often are. Like even here in Germany, where we do have Wi-Fi, we do have good rooms, everything, it's still sometimes a struggle to get it and to use it in the way that we would like to. So yeah, just it's actually quite easy if you just break it down on the very basic logistical level. So this is what I could come up with from the top of my head here.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And I think that concludes the first part of today's workshop. I hope that all participants, you have learned something from the two honorable guest speakers. I know that I did. And I think the good thing is that both speakers will be joining us in each breakout room, so you have more time to discuss with them and whatever you think necessary for your action plan and whatever you think is good in terms of discussing with them about key stakeholders. Back to you, Rekha. We are having the health break.
That's right. 8 minutes of time health break, maybe? Yeah, okay, then see you in 8 minutes.
Shengdao, do you have any announcement to make before we go to the breakout rooms? Okay, so I think just to, without further ado, let's go to the breakout rooms. I believe that, well, participants will have some more questions to our speakers, and then we can move on to the discussion. And then if there's anything, we just can wrap up 10 minutes before. So we come back to the main room 10 minutes before the end, okay? Okay, Shengdao, would you like to close the session for today? We had a very lively session in the breakout.
Okay. Yep. So once again, thank you to both our speakers.